They say old men like me talk too much about the past. Maybe that's true. Maybe when you get to a certain age, all you've got left are your memories, good or bad. But when your past still burns in your chest like a slow fire, you don't forget, you can't forget. My name's Frank Cole, I'm 50 years old, born and raised in Maple Ridge, Kentucky, the kind of small town where everybody waves, and gossip travels faster than the church bells on Sunday morning. I've lived a simple life, worked hard, paid my dues, and loved one woman more than I ever thought a man could love anyone. For 30 years, I thought I knew her inside out. Her favorite songs, the way she liked her coffee, the quiet smile she'd give when she caught me staring. Turns out, I didn't even know her real name. Yeah, sounds crazy, right? But that's the truth. After decades of marriage, birthdays, anniversaries, morning coffees, hospital visits, Christmases by the tree, I found out that the woman I called my wife wasn't the woman she said she was. When that truth finally came out, it didn't just shatter my marriage. When it tore down everything I believed about love, about honesty, about the idea that two people could build a life together on trust. You ever stand in your own living room, surrounded by photos of your life, weddings, vacations, smiling faces, and realize every single picture might be a lie? It's like standing on a floor you thought was solid, only to find it's hollow beneath your feet. And I'll tell you this, betrayal hits different when it comes late in life. You don't bounce back like a 20-year-old. You just sit there, staring at the walls, asking yourself how you missed it all those years. This isn't a story about young love, or some quick heartbreak. This is a story about a lifetime of lies, about a man who gave his whole self to someone, and discovered she'd been living a secret life right under his roof. But it's not all bitterness and rage. No, my revenge didn't come from hate. It came from justice, quiet, patient, the kind of justice that doesn't need shouting because sometimes silence cuts deeper than words ever could. So grab your coffee, or maybe a stiff drink if you've got one, because what I'm about to tell you will make you look twice at the person lying next to you tonight. It'll make you wonder what stories they've hidden behind their smile, what names they've buried in their past. This story isn't just mine, it's a reminder that even the closest heart can hold the darkest secret. And sometimes, the person you trust most is the one who's been living a lie the longest. I grew up in a little town called Maple Ridge, Kentucky, the kind of place that never made it onto any map worth printing. Population? Maybe 3,000–4,000 back in those days. You could walk from one end to the other in under 15 minutes, and you'd still pass 3 churches, 2 bars, and one old man sitting on a rocking chair outside the hardware store, ready to tell you how things used to be. Everybody knew everybody. And I mean everybody. If you didn't wave while driving down Main Street, folks figured you were either new, lost, or plain rude. We didn't have much, but we had enough. My dad was a carpenter. Rough hands, quiet voice, the kind of man who didn't talk about feelings but showed love by fixing things. If a hinge squeaked, he oiled it. If a roof leaked, he patched it. He used to tell me, son, a man's worth ain't measured by what he owns. It's by what he builds and who he stands beside when the day's done. I didn't fully understand that back then. But those words, they stuck. Mama, on the other hand, was the warm heart of our little home. She ran a diner on the corner of Main and Birch. Cole's Kitchen, hand-painted sign, always smelling like fresh biscuits and black coffee. That place was where half the town started their mornings. And it's where I spent most of my evenings helping her clean up. And that's where I first saw her. It was late spring. I remember because the air smelled like rain and wildflowers, and the screen door of the diner creaked louder than usual that day. She walked in wearing a faded denim jacket and a white dress with tiny blue flowers on it. Nothing fancy, but she made it look like something out of a dream. Her name, or the name she gave me, was Lydia. She'd just moved into town, said she came down from Ohio looking for a fresh start. Folks around Maple Ridge always welcomed newcomers. They brought fresh gossip and sometimes better pies. But Lydia, she brought something different, something I couldn't quite explain even now. She was 20, same as me. Auburn hair that turned gold under the diner lights and eyes the color of late summer leaves. Soft, calm, but hiding something I couldn't read. When she smiled, it wasn't loud or flirtatious. It was quiet, like she knew you before you even said a word. She got a job waiting tables, and every day after work she'd stay late to help Mama clean. I'd hang around, pretending to fix the jukebox or mop the floor just so I could talk to her a little longer. We'd chat about everything and nothing, where she grew up, what she liked to read, what she wanted in life. She said she didn't have family left. Said her parents died young and she'd been drifting since. Back then I didn't question much. You don't when you're young and your heart's leading the way. She made me feel seen, like I mattered, even when the rest of the world barely noticed a small-town boy trying to make ends meet. I remember the first time I took her to the river. Our river. It wasn't much, just a quiet bend behind Miller's farm. But under the moonlight it felt like our own little world. We sat on the tailgate of my old Chevy, feet dangling, sipping from a shared bottle of cola. She talked about dreams, a house with white shutters, 2 kids, maybe a dog. I told her I wanted to build something with my hands that would outlast me. A home, a life, something solid. She smiled and said, "Then build it with me." And just like that, I was gone, completely gone. For months we were inseparable. Sunday picnics, church fairs, bonfires by the lake. So if you saw me, you saw her. The whole town started saying things like, "Those two are made for each other." And you know what? I believed them. Within a year we were married. A small ceremony right behind my folks' house under the big old maple tree that had stood there for generations. That tree. It's where my dad first kissed my mom, where I carved our initials one summer night with a pocket knife, thinking love like that would last forever. The whole town showed up. Mama baked her famous pecan pie. Dad built the arch we stood under. Lydia wore a simple dress she'd sewn herself, and I swear to this day, she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. When the preacher asked if I took her as my wife, I didn't hesitate, not a second. Afterward, we danced in the grass while fireflies lit up around us. For a boy like me, raised on hard work and little luck, it felt like a fairy tale. We moved into a small house on Elm Street, not far from the diner, fresh paint, hand-built furniture. The scent of sawdust mixed with cinnamon candles. It was ours. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, and back then, I believed them. If I'd known then what I know now, that behind that perfect smile was a whole other life waiting to be uncovered, maybe I'd have looked deeper. Maybe I'd have asked a few more questions, but love makes fools out of all of us, doesn't it? And I was the proudest fool of them all. The first 20 years, they were everything I ever hoped for. No big city lights, no fancy vacations, just a simple, honest life, the kind I'd seen my parents live and thought, yeah, that's enough for me. After the wedding, Lydia and I moved into that little white house on Elm Street. I built it myself. Piece by piece, every plank, every nail, every window frame cut by hand. There's a special kind of pride in building something with your own 2 hands, especially when it's meant to hold the people you love most. I'd wake up before sunrise, smell the coffee she'd set out for me, kiss her cheek, and head to the workshop my father left me, Cole & Son Carpentry. It wasn't much, just a dusty old shed and a pickup truck, but I turned it into something steady. Folks around Maple Ridge knew if they needed a porch fixed, a barn built, or a rocking chair restored, I was their man. And Lydia, she was the glue that held everything together. She kept the books, managed the orders, even answered the phone when customers called. She had this way of making people feel special, remembered. She'd ask old Mrs. Riley how her arthritis was, or remind Sheriff Dugan that his anniversary was coming up. Everyone in town loved her, and I couldn't blame them. At home, everything was just as it should be. Dinner at 6, laughter after, old country music humming softly from the kitchen radio. She loved keeping the place spotless, polished wood floors, curtains always washed, even the porch steps scrubbed till they shined. I used to joke, "You'd think the president was visiting the way you clean this house." She'd laugh, flick her towel at me and say, "Well, maybe he should." I'd make him pie. We didn't have much, but it felt like we had everything. Then came Tommy, our one and only. Man, he was something else. Bright eyes, quiet curiosity, always tinkering with things. Must have gotten that from me, but he had Lydia's charm too. He could talk his way out of anything. I remember holding him the day he was born, that tiny bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket, and thinking, This is it. This is what life's about, everything else. Work, money, worries. It all faded the second I looked at him. Those early years were a blur of laughter and scraped knees, bedtime stories and Sunday picnics. We'd take him to the river, where Lydia and I used to sit when we were young. He'd toss rocks in the water while we watched the sun go down behind Miller's barn. I used to think, this is heaven. This is the kind of peace you spend a whole lifetime chasing. As he grew, so did our lives. The business got busier, word spread. Folks started calling me Frank the Fixer. I hired a couple of young guys from town, trained them, taught them the trade the way my dad taught me. Lydia ran everything like a captain at sea. Invoices, calls, even the tax papers I could never make sense of. At church, people would say, Frank, you and Lydia are what marriage is supposed to look like. And I believed them. When Tommy got older, he won a scholarship to study engineering in the city. I remember crying that morning we dropped him off. Lydia squeezed my hand and said, we did good, Frank, we did real good. And she was right, we were proud, scared, but proud. The house got quieter after that. No more running footsteps. No more cartoons blaring on Saturday mornings. Just the two of us again, the way it began. We'd sit out on the porch most evenings, watching the sun melt behind the hills. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder and I'd think we made it. We really made it. Neighbors used to joke, Frank, you and Lydia are the couple folks write country songs about. And I'd grin like a fool, sip my sweet tea and say, yeah, I reckon we are. But here's the thing about perfect pictures, and they're often painted over cracks, and I was too blind, too content to notice what was underneath. Looking back now, there were signs, little ones, moments where she seemed distant, lost in thought. Letters she'd tear up before I could read them. Calls she'd take outside, saying it was about supplies or church ladies. I ignored it all because why question happiness? I thought our life was steady, solid as oak. But what I didn't see was that rot can grow even inside the strongest wood. Quiet, unseen, until one day the whole thing gives way. And when it finally did, everything I'd built came crashing down. It started small, the kind of small you brush off, a change so gentle you don't notice it's a warning. Lydia wasn't angry. She wasn't cold either, just different. Like a song I'd heard 1,000 times suddenly sounding out of tune. She used to hum while she cooked, sing along to Patsy Cline while sweeping the kitchen floor. Now the house was quiet, too quiet. She'd sit by the window with her coffee, staring out toward the road as if she was waiting for something, or someone. I'd walk in from the shop, hands covered in sawdust, and she'd jump a little. Not much, but enough for me to notice. Then she'd smile, soft and practiced, and ask how my day was. But her eyes wouldn't meet mine. At first I figured it was just age catching up with her. We were getting older after all. Maybe it was hormones or boredom or just the quiet settling in now that Tommy was gone. I didn't want to make a fuss over nothing. But then the phone calls started, at odd hours, sometimes late at night when we were getting ready for bed. I'd hear her voice low and careful like she didn't want to wake me. If I stirred or asked who it was, she'd say, just Betty from church. Her husband's sick again. Funny thing, though, when I saw Betty at Sunday service, she looked just fine. I told myself I was imagining things. That's what men like me do. We avoid trouble until it's standing right in front of us. Then the mail started coming. It was a Thursday morning. I went to fetch the paper and saw a small stack of envelopes tucked under the doormat. Mostly bills, a catalog, the usual, but one envelope caught my eye. Heavy paper, neat handwriting. The name on it read, Mrs. L. Harmon, not Lydia Cole. I frowned, thinking maybe the mailman had mixed up the roots again. I almost laughed. Old Hank, our mail carrier, had been known to enjoy a little liquid courage during his rounds. Wouldn't be the first time he delivered half the street's mail to the wrong door. I set it aside and didn't mention it. But then another came the next week. Same name, same handwriting. And when I brought it in and set it on the kitchen table, Lydia froze. Her hand, mid-stirring a pot of stew, just stopped. Then she turned and said, too quickly, "Oh, that's just some old paperwork. Before we met. Nothing important. She reached for it, but I had already picked it up. It wasn't sealed like normal mail. It looked like someone had already opened it and re-glued it shut. Paperwork? I asked, turning it over. No return address? That's when she did something she'd never done before. She snatched it right out of my hand, didn't even try to play it off gentle, just grabbed it. Her voice cracked when she said, "I told you, Frank. It's nothing, please just drop it." And I did, because I trusted her. Because for 20 years Lydia had never given me a reason not to. That was my first mistake, believing her. After that day, the air in the house changed. Little things started to pile up like sawdust in the corners. Quiet, soft, but building into something you couldn't ignore. She began locking her desk drawers. She'd stay out later after church meetings. She started dressing nicer too. A touch of lipstick for grocery runs. A new blouse she found on sale. I wanted to ask questions, but every time I opened, my mouth, that same old voice inside, said, "Don't be foolish, Frank. She's your wife. She loves you." But love, real love, doesn't hide behind locked drawers and secret mail. I remember one evening, I was closing the shop when I saw her car drive by. Didn't think much of it, until I noticed she wasn't heading home. She turned down the old highway that led out of town. No church, no market, nothing that way except the diner and the motel. That night she came home late, said she'd been helping a friend. Her eyes looked tired, but her perfume was fresh. I wanted to believe her so badly it hurt. I told myself she was just lonely, restless maybe, missing Tommy, missing youth. I blamed everything but the truth. Because the truth, the idea that Lydia might be living a lie right under my roof, was too much for a man like me to face. And so I kept pretending the house still felt warm, pretending the laughter would come back, pretending my wife wasn't slowly slipping away from me, letter by letter, lie by lie. But deep down, something inside me knew. I didn't have proof, not yet, but the feeling, that heavy cold pit in my stomach, told me everything I didn't want to hear. Something was wrong. Something had changed. And soon, I was going to find out what. The day the truth came out was the day I stopped being naive. You know, they say wisdom comes with age, but sometimes it comes with heartbreak. And that Tuesday afternoon, that was the day everything I thought I knew turned to dust. I remember it clear as a photograph. The sun was warm, the kind of Kentucky day where the air smells like cut grass and coffee from the diner 2 streets over. I'd finished a job early, fixing a porch railing for old man Davis, and I thought, why not surprise Lydia with lunch? After all, she'd been acting off lately, quieter than usual. I figured maybe a little gesture would break the ice, so I picked up her favorite, chicken salad sandwich from Millie's Diner. Extra pickles, no onions. I even grabbed one of those sweet teas she loved, the kind that could rot your teeth just by looking at it. I pulled into the driveway humming an old tune, feeling kind of proud of myself for still trying after all these years. But when I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The house was quiet, too quiet. Her car was gone, but her purse was still on the table, and her phone was sitting on the counter, buzzing every few seconds. That little vibration echoed through the kitchen like a ticking clock. I stood there, sandwich bag in one hand, tea in the other, watching that phone light up again and again. Now, I've never been the snooping type. My daddy used to say, if you go looking for snakes, don't be surprised when you get bit. But this time, something deep in my gut said this wasn't about curiosity. It was about truth. So I set down the food, wiped my hands on my jeans, and picked up the phone. No passcode, unlocked. Right there, on the screen, were messages, dozens of them, from a name I'd never seen before, Charles Harmon. My first thought was maybe it was her cousin or an old church friend. But then I opened one, and the blood in my veins turned cold. Liddy, I still can't believe you pulled it off. They all think you're gone. You were brilliant as always. It's like you disappeared. I miss you. I wish things could have been different, Liddy. He called her Liddy. Nobody had ever called my wife that before, not me, not her friends, not even her own family. At least the family she told me about. I scrolled back. The messages weren't new. Some dated all the way back to 1995. 30 years. 30 years of conversations. Photos and letters hidden under my nose. My hands started shaking. My throat went dry. I felt stupid, like the world's biggest fool. I'd been married half a century and somehow, I didn't even know the real name of the woman sleeping next to me. That's when I saw one message that made my knees weak. "It's better this way, Liddy. You have a new life. They'll never find you. Never find you." Find her from what? I read it again and again, trying to make sense of the words, but every time, the picture got uglier. The woman I'd built my life with, the one who raised my son, shared my bed, prayed beside me, had a secret. And not the small kind. The kind that could ruin everything. I didn't call her. Didn't text. Didn't break nothing. I just sat there. Sat in that quiet house. The ticking of the kitchen clock getting louder and louder until it felt like a hammer in my skull. Hours passed before I heard her car pull up. I watched her through the window. Calm. Smiling. Carrying a bag of groceries like nothing in the world was wrong. She walked in and froze when she saw me. I didn't say a word at first. I just stared. Finally, I asked, slow, quiet, almost polite, "Who's Charles Harmon?" It was like the air got sucked right out of the room. Her smile vanished. The grocery bag slipped from her hands. Apples rolled across the floor. For a second, she didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Then her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with something, fear, maybe, or guilt. And she whispered, "Frank." "I can explain, that's all she said, no denial. No confusion, just that one word, explain. And right then, I knew every church meeting, every late-night call, every letter addressed to Mrs. Harmon, and they weren't mistakes. They were pieces of a life she'd buried. And I'd been living with a ghost. I didn't yell. Didn't throw a fit, I just said, "Start talking. Lydia, or whatever your name really is." She sat down at the table, hands trembling, eyes darting everywhere but mine. Then she said something that made the world tilt beneath my feet. "My name isn't Lydia Cole, it never was." For a moment, I thought she was joking, but the look in her eyes, that hollow, haunted look, told me she was dead serious. She said her real name was Lydia Harmon and that once upon a time, she'd been married to a man named Charles. She claimed she'd escaped a bad situation, that he was dangerous, controlling, maybe even violent. Said she had to fake her death to get away. No, I'm no saint, but I'm not heartless either. If that story had come from anyone else, maybe I'd have believed it, but the way she said it, too smooth, too practiced. It didn't sound like a confession. It sounded like a script. And when I asked her, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she said, "Because if I did, you'd have left me too." That hit harder than she knew. Because what she didn't realize, like what she never understood, was that I would have stood by her no matter what. If she'd told me the truth 50 years ago, I would have helped her rebuild her life, but lies I couldn't live with. So I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the road we'd walked 1,000 times together. And I said quietly, "You took away my choice, Lydia. You took away my right to know the truth." She started to cry, but I didn't feel sympathy anymore. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me standing there empty. In that moment, every memory on every Christmas, every kiss, every laugh turned into something else, a lie wrapped in a smile. That was the night my marriage ended, even though we still shared the same roof for a while after. That was the night Frank Cole died inside, and the man who took his place. He wasn't looking for love anymore, he was looking for answers and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of revenge. After that night, the truth started spilling out slow, like poison that had been sitting in the veins for years, waiting for its moment to burn. She didn't tell it all at once. Lydia, or Liddy, as I now knew some other man used to call her, let it drip piece by piece, hoping maybe I'd lose interest before the story ran dry. But I didn't. I couldn't. I'd spent my whole life believing I knew her. The woman who made my morning coffee, who ironed my shirts, who stood beside me at funerals and birthdays alike. And now she was sitting across from me at our old oak kitchen table, confessing that she'd been someone else all along. Her real name wasn't Lydia Cole, it was Lydia Harmon. And that man from the phone, Charles Harmon, when it wasn't some fling from her past, he was her husband, her first husband. I remember sitting there, the clock ticking loud between us as she talked. She said they'd been married young, back up in Ohio, said he was charming at first, the kind of man who could sell you a broken tractor and make you thank him for it. But then she looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring, my wedding ring, and whispered, "He wasn't who I thought he was." I asked, "Who was he then?" She looked up, eyes wet, and said, "A liar, a con man, and I was his partner." For a second I thought I misheard. "Partner?" She nodded, slow. Told me how they used to run real estate deals, how they'd promise folks new homes, dream homes, take down payments, then skip town before the first foundation was even laid. Families left broke, some living out of motels, others losing their life savings. It hit me like a hammer. The woman I loved, the one who used to cry over sad movies and bring soup to sick neighbors, had once helped destroy lives. She said it was all Charles's idea, that he was the mastermind, and she was just scared, dragged along for the ride. That one day, she decided to leave and to run, and fake her death to get away from him. But I'd already seen the messages, and the messages told a different story. He wasn't dead. He wasn't even gone. They'd stayed in touch for decades. I asked her, "If you left him, why'd you keep writing to him? Why keep the same name?" And she said, "Because I owed him. We both did things, Frank, things we couldn't take back." She buried her face in her hands then, sobbing like a child, but I just sat there, numb, because I couldn't find the man she was describing. The woman in front of me didn't fit the picture anymore. It was like my wife had been replaced by a stranger wearing her face. She told me how they'd scammed towns across 3 states, used new names every time. Charles and Lydia Harmon, then Liddy and Charles Hartwell, then finally, Lydia Cole. That last one, she said, was supposed to be her clean start. When she met me, she swore she was done with all that, said she'd found peace. "Peace," I repeated, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "You found peace by lying to me for 50 years? She winced, tears still rolling, but she didn't argue. She just whispered, "I changed, Frank, I really did. I built a life with you. I meant it, every bit of it. But you can't build a real marriage on fake names and stolen pasts. No matter how much you tell yourself you've changed, the truth has a way of crawling out from under the floorboards." When I didn't say anything, she reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. I pulled back. That moment, that single pull, felt like ripping the last thread holding us together. Then she said the words that nearly broke me all over again. "Please, Frank, don't tell anyone. If people find out, we'll lose everything. The house, our reputation. Tommy." She stopped short when she said his name. Our boy. Our son. She looked terrified, not because of what she'd done, but because she might lose the illusion she'd built around it. For a moment, I almost believed her again. She had that same look she'd given me 50 years ago under the maple tree, the look that said she'd love me forever. But this time, that look felt hollow. I stood up, walked over to the mantel where our family photos sat. There we were, in every frame, smiling, laughing, pretending. Her eyes in every photo were different now. I couldn't unsee it. She didn't just lie about her name. She lied about who she was. And that's when it hit me. She hadn't just fooled me. She'd stolen my whole life. 50 years of trust, love, and loyalty, all built on sand. I turned to her and said, "You didn't just lie, Lydia. You stole the truth from me. You stole my right to know the woman I married." She started to cry again, saying she'd make it right, that she'd go to the police, that she'd confess, but I didn't believe her, not anymore, because liars don't just stop. They just get better at it. So I told her I needed time. She nodded, thinking maybe that meant hope, but in my mind, I was already done being the fool, done being the man who looked the other way, because now, I wasn't looking for forgiveness, I was looking for answers. Who else knew? Was Charles still out there? Were their victims still looking for the people who ruined their lives? That night, while she slept in the next room, I sat in the dark with her phone in my hand, scrolling through every message, every photo, every memory that wasn't mine. And as I read, the pieces started coming together, and the towns, the names, the money trails. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I was going to find the truth, and when I did, she wasn't the only one who'd pay for what she'd done. I didn't yell, didn't throw things, didn't raise my hand or my voice. No, that wasn't the kind of revenge I wanted. After 50 years of lies, rage would have been too easy, too short-lived. I wanted something quieter, something smarter, something that would last. See, when a man spends half a century building things, houses, tables, fences, he learns patience. He learns how to measure twice, cut once, and wait for the right moment. That's exactly how I planned to take my revenge. The first thing I did was pay a visit to an old friend, Earl Jennings, one of the guys I used to work with back in my carpentry days. Earl had hung up his hammer years ago and was now working as a sheriff's deputy out in Franklin County. A good man, solid as oak, the kind you could still trust to keep his word. I told him I needed his help. Didn't give too many details at first. Just said, "Earl, I think my wife ain't who she says she is." He frowned, leaned back in his chair and said, "You sure you want to open that door, Frank? Some truths don't close easy." I told him it was already open, so he ran the name for me, Lydia Harmon. I'll never forget the look on his face when he came back from that computer. Eyes wide, jaw tight, voice lower than usual. "Frank, you ain't gonna believe this. Your wife, or whoever she is, we died, officially in 1970, house fire, Ohio. A house fire, declared dead. No record after that." He looked at me like he wanted to say more, but I just nodded, thanked him, and walked out. I didn't turn her in. Not yet. Because rage burns fast. But truth takes time, and I wanted her to feel every second of it. When I got home that night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I acted. I told Lydia I'd been thinking, that maybe I'd overreacted, that maybe I could forgive her, start fresh, just like she did all those years ago. She looked shocked, relieved, maybe even grateful. For a second, I saw that same soft smile that used to melt me. She hugged me, whispered, "Thank you. Frank, you don't know what that means." But she was wrong. I knew exactly what it meant. It meant she still trusted me. And that was the key to everything. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the forgiving husband. I cooked dinner, fixed the porch light, sat beside her on the couch and listened to her talk about nothing. But every night when she fell asleep, I went to work. I started collecting proof, all of it. Every letter she'd ever hidden, every email, every message to Charles. I copied photos from her phone, backed up her texts, even dug through old boxes in the attic, where I found a driver's license, not in the name Lydia Cole, but Lydia Marie Harmon. Same face, same eyes, different life. I slipped it into an envelope and locked it in my toolbox. Didn't tell a soul, not even Earl. Then I did something I never imagined I'd do at 70 years old. I went digging through the past, using old newspaper clippings and some help from a local journalist who owed me a favor. I tracked down the people Lydia and Charles had scammed decades ago. Most of them were gray-haired now, like me, worn down but not broken. Folks from small towns across Ohio and Indiana who'd lost their savings to the Harmons real estate group. When I called one man, Bill Sanford, his voice cracked when I said her name. He said, "You mean to tell me that woman's alive? I lost my house because of her. My kids grew up in a trailer park because of that scam." I told him everything, not because I wanted sympathy, but because I wanted truth. Piece by piece, I gathered their stories, their documents, their pain. I met with another woman, Martha Clark, now in her 80s, who'd been promised a home that never got built. She still kept the fake contract in a folder. When she handed it to me, her hands were shaking. "I prayed for years she'd get what's coming to her," Martha said softly, "and I promised her, she will." Week by week, I built my case, not a legal one, and not yet, but a moral one, a collection of truths, of names, of lies that had sat buried for half a century. I wasn't after money, never was. I wasn't looking to ruin her reputation or get her thrown in a cell just for revenge's sake. No, I was after justice, real justice. I wanted the world to see her for what she truly was. Not the perfect wife, not the gentle church lady, not the Lydia Cole everyone adored, but the woman who built her whole life on stolen names and broken promises, and the only way to do that was to let her walk right into her own downfall. So I waited patiently, like a hunter sitting in tall grass, watching the wind move but not flinching. She started relaxing again and thought I'd moved on, thought everything was fine. We even went to church together, smiled at neighbors, waved at folks from the porch like we were the picture of peace. But every smile I gave was hollow. Every kind word I spoke was just bait on a hook, because I knew what she didn't. Her past was finally catching, up to her, and I was the one leading it straight to her door. When the time came, I mailed copies of everything I'd gathered, the messages, the documents, even her fake death certificate, to one place that still had open wounds. The Ohio State Bureau of Investigation. Didn't sign my name. Didn't have to. They'd find her soon enough. All I had to do now was wait, and while I waited, I watched her live her normal little life, planting flowers, watching her shows, writing in that old leather journal like nothing had changed. She didn't know that every day she woke up, she was one sunrise closer to losing everything she'd ever stolen. That was my revenge. Not with anger, not with hate, but with truth. Truth so sharp it cut deeper than any blade ever could. The night it all came crashing down was one I'll never forget. Even now, I can still hear the clock ticking on the kitchen wall. Steady, cold, like it knew what was coming. It was a Sunday evening, dinner plates still on the table, the smell of roast chicken hanging in the air. Our son, Tommy, had come by after work, just like he did every other week. He was talking about the grandkids, about work at the mill, about life. Simple things. Good things. But my mind wasn't in the room. Not really, because I knew tonight was the night. The night the truth was going to stand up and breathe. No more hiding. No more pretending. I asked them both to sit. Lydia looked at me funny, that small, polite smile she always used when she was nervous. "Everything all right, Frank?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "just something we need to talk about." Tommy sat down too, confused. Glancing between us, he must have felt the heaviness in the air, like a storm just waiting to break. I took a long breath. Then I said the words that had been burning in my chest for months. "Tommy, your mother hasn't been honest with us. Her name isn't Lydia Cole, it's Lydia Harmon." At first, silence, then a laugh, soft, disbelieving, from Tommy. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I just reached into my folder and laid it all on the table. The letters, the ID card, the printouts of messages from Charles, every page a piece of the life she'd buried, every photo a nail in the coffin of her perfect little lie. Lydia didn't say a word. Her eyes darted to the papers, to me then to Tommy. Her hands trembled in her lap. "Mom," Tommy said, his voice cracking. "What is this? Who are these people?" And that's when I saw it. The truth bleeding through her silence. She didn't deny it, didn't even try. She just lowered her head and started to cry. Not the kind of cry that asks for forgiveness, but the kind that comes from finally being cornered by your own lies. Tommy stood up. Shaking his head, he looked lost, like a little boy again. "Mom, who are you?" he asked, barely able to say the words. She reached for him, sobbing. "I did it for love, Tommy. I had no choice. I just wanted a new life." I stayed silent, because I'd already heard every excuse, every version of that story. Love built on lies isn't love. It's survival, and she had survived. By burying her past in our family, by stealing years that weren't hers to live. Tommy backed away, tears in his eyes. "All this time? 50 years? She nodded, whispering. I thought it was over. I thought it didn't matter anymore, but it did. It always did. Because the truth doesn't die, it just waits. That night, Tommy left without saying another word. The sound of his truck starting up outside was like a door closing somewhere deep inside me. For the first time in 50 years, The house felt cold, not because of the weather, but because there was no more pretending to warm us. Lydia sat at the table long after I went quiet. Every now and then she'd whisper something. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." But I couldn't answer her. There was nothing left to say. We slept in the same house that night, but it felt like two strangers trapped under the same roof. The space between us was filled with ghosts. Her past, my anger, the life we'd both lost. A few days later, I saw the sheriff's car pull up in front of the house. Earl stepped out, hat in hand. He looked more tired than usual, like he hated what he was about to do. He wasn't there to arrest her. The statute of limitations had long passed. But the truth doesn't expire the way laws do. He sat her down, asked a few questions, confirmed a few details, enough to make it real, official. By that evening, word had spread through Maple Ridge, and, just like that in the perfect picture cracked wide, open, the same folks who used to wave at her from their porches now turned away. The church ladies stopped calling. Her friends stopped visiting. The name Lydia Cole, once spoken with respect, became a whisper. People said behind closed doors. Her reputation on the Angel of Maple Ridge, the kind-hearted woman who never missed Sunday service, was gone overnight, burned down, same as that fake house she died in all those years ago. She packed her things one quiet morning, didn't say where she was going, didn't ask me to stop her, just folded her clothes, zipped the suitcase, and looked at me one last time. Her eyes were red, but her voice was calm. "I did love you. Frank, in my own way." I nodded once. "Maybe you did. But it wasn't real. None of it was." She turned, walked out the door.
And this time, she didn't look back. When her car disappeared down that long gravel road,
I didn't feel relief, didn't feel victory either. Just a strange, heavy kind of silence, the kind that settles after a storm. The house was mine, again. But it didn't feel like home anymore, because revenge doesn't fix what's broken, it just uncovers what's been hiding in the dark, and once the truth comes out, you can never put it back. For months after she left, the house just sat there, still and hollow, like it was holding its breath. The porch swing creaked in the evening breeze, and I'd sit out there for hours, just listening to the cicadas hum. Sometimes I'd look down the gravel road, half expecting to see her car turn the corner, but it never did. You don't realize how much space a person takes up until they're gone, not just in your house, but in your days. Every mug, every picture frame, every sound, right? It all reminds you. I used to think silence was peace, but silence can be cruel. It echoes back everything you tried to forget. The neighbors talked, of course. In a small town, gossip travels faster than truth ever will. Some pitied me. Poor Frank, bless his heart. He didn't deserve that. Others said I must have known all along, that maybe I'd looked the other way because it was easier. But the ones who really knew me, the old friends, the folks who'd seen me work with my hands every day for 40 years, they understood. They saw a man who'd lost everything but still stood up straight. And in a place like Maple Ridge, that counts for something. The first few weeks, I kept expecting her to call, even after everything. A part of me waited, like muscle memory that just doesn't fade. I'd hear the phone ring and my heart would jump, but it was never her. Tommy came by now and then, quieter than before. He was angry, but not at me. Mostly just hurt. The kind of hurt that doesn't show until years later. He stopped talking to her completely, blocked her number, told me once, "Dad, I can't forgive her for lying to you, or for lying to me," and I didn't know what to say because forgiveness isn't something you can hand out like candy. It's something you have to grow into, and some of us just never get there. I tried to fill my days. Started fixing up old furniture again, just to keep my hands busy. Built a rocking chair out of leftover oak. It sits on the porch now. Hers used to be beside it. Empty. Always empty. Sometimes, I'd drive out past the river where we used to sit when we were young. The same spot where she told me she wanted a house. A family, a forever. The river hadn't changed, young, still slow, still brown, still whispering the same song it did 50 years ago. But I wasn't that man anymore. The dreamer. The believer. I was something quieter, wiser, Maybe, but lonelier too. Funny thing is, I didn't feel hatred anymore, not even anger, just emptiness. Like the part of me that trusted too easily had died with her lies. You reach a certain age, and you start to see life differently. You stop chasing explanations, you stop asking why, because the truth doesn't always come wrapped in reason. Sometimes it just is. So, I stopped asking, stopped trying to fix what was already broken, and started learning how to live with it instead. There was one night, maybe 6 months after she left, when it hit me. I was sitting out back, watching the sun drop behind the trees, the air thick with the smell of pine and dust, and I realized I didn't miss her. Not the woman she became. I missed the woman I thought she was, the one who never really existed. That was the hardest part to swallow, knowing. I'd spent 50 years loving a ghost, but even then, I couldn't say I regretted it, because for all the lies, for all the betrayal, there were still real moments buried in there. Laughter, love, family dinners, birthdays, Christmas mornings. Those memories were mine, not hers to steal, and no amount of deceit could erase that. Over time, the whispers in town faded, people moved on to newer scandals. The world keeps spinning, even when yours stands still. The diner where we met closed down last year. The old maple tree we got married under finally came down in a storm. I stood there the next morning, looking at the stump, and it hit me. Everything ends. Even the strongest roots can rot if the soil's been poisoned long enough. But that's life, isn't it? You plant your hopes, water them with trust, and pray they grow straight. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. These days, the house feels too big, too quiet, but it's honest, and that's more than I can say for most of my life. There's peace in that, in knowing that what's left is real. No illusions, no lies, no masks, just me, my tools, my memories, and the truth, and sometimes, that's enough. Now, when folks ask me if I'd do it all again, marry her, live that life, spend 50 years beside a woman who wasn't who she said she was, I pause. It's not an easy question. See, time has a funny way of softening things. What used to hurt like hell starts to feel like an old scar. Still there, still visible, but no longer bleeding, and despite everything, despite the lies, the betrayal, the secrets, there were still moments that were real to me, even if they weren't to her. The laughter around the dinner table, the way she'd hum in the kitchen while making cornbread, the long drives out to the lake on Sundays, windows down, radio humming low. Maybe the truth was a lie, but the feeling wasn't. And that's the strange thing about life. Sometimes the heart believes what the head would have never allowed. If I've learned anything, it's this. Love without truth is just illusion, and illusion always fades. It might shine bright at first, fool you into thinking you've found forever, but sooner or later the cracks start showing. And when they do, you're left standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out which parts were ever real. Looking back, I think the worst part wasn't losing her. It was losing myself. I spent half a century being the husband, the provider, the man who trusted too much. And when that curtain finally fell, I had to ask, who am I now without her lie to hold on to? Turns out, I'm still Frank Cole, a little older, a little slower, but honest again. I remember one afternoon not too long ago, a young couple stopped by the shop. They were newlyweds, arguing over what kind of wood to use for a dining table. She wanted maple, he wanted oak. They laughed, teased each other, and asked me which one lasts longer. I told them, doesn't matter what kind of wood it is, and as long as you take care of it. Neglect it, hide the cracks, and one day it'll split clean in two. They just smiled, not knowing I wasn't talking about furniture. So if you're listening to this, when whoever you are, and something in your life feels off, something doesn't add up, something feels too perfect to be true, don't wait 50 years like I did to open your eyes, because the truth, no matter how painful, will always set you free. It may break your heart, it may shatter your world, but it'll give you something you can live with, yourself. You know, I used to think revenge was about payback, about evening the score. But now I know, it's not. True revenge isn't about destroying the other person. It's about reclaiming the part of you they tried to take. I didn't destroy her. I exposed her. And in doing so, I found myself again, every night before bed. I still sit by that old window and watch the porch light flicker. I think about the years, the lies, the love that might have been, and I don't feel bitterness anymore, just acceptance. Because sometimes life gives you answers too late to change the story, but just in time to change yourself. If there's one thing this old man's learned, it's that truth and peace walk hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And if that means living out my days alone on this porch, with the sound of the crickets, the stars overhead, and nothing left to hide, then I reckon I'm finally home.